Welcome back and thanks for joining me. It's week 5 of the Winter Stitch Sampler Knit Along. I'm Holly, this is at Yarn's Length, and this week we'll be working Little Blossom Stitch. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. By clicking the button, you'll get notifications each time we post a new video. So every time we post a new stitch for the Winter Stitch Sampler Knit Along, you'll be the first one to know. Little Blossom Stitch is a fun stitch that creates, well, little blossoms on these long stems. They kind of look like they belong in a Dr. Seuss book or something like that. And while I didn't think working this pattern was anything particularly special, like it's not too difficult and it's not too interesting, which may be nice after last week, I really like the look of this, and I think this might be my favorite stitch in the knit along. So this is what it looks like. It's continuing blossoms all the way up. The wrong side actually has a really interesting look too, which I'll show you. It almost looks like a honeycomb stitch, right? Like a really big honeycomb stitch. But this is definitely a stitch that you can incorporate into patterns for kids, right? This looks like something very whimsical and playful. And I love the all over texture. So this is another pattern that grows and shrinks, but it grows a lot more than last week. So we'll be increasing a ton of stitches, just about double, I think, and then back down to our original count. And it's worked over 20 rows, but to make it fit the panel like depth-wise, row-wise, what I had to do was chop 10 rows off. So just like that first week when we worked the butterflies and then we worked a panel, worked a repeat of them offset, we're going to work a row of these blossoms and then work a row of them offset. But for the final, you're only going to work the first row of blossoms again. So it ends up being very symmetrical. It looks lovely and it fits, so it works. For this week, I'll be working a swatch. You can either work the swatch or you can start working on the panel. I'll give you instructions for both. In your first step, like every other week, is to go ahead and cast on. I've already cast on mine. If you are working the swatch, you want to cast on 16. This is a pattern worked in multiples of 10 plus 6. So 16 is the lowest we can go. And then if you are planning on working the actual panel, go ahead and cast on 66 like we have every other week. You can just see my, if you see my shadow, it's because I'm trying to keep track of my spot. For the actual panel, you're going to start with 3 rows of garter stitch. This isn't required for the pattern itself. That is to make it fit into the same size panel as every other panel for the knit along. So I'm not going to work those 3 rows of garter stitch, but if you are working the actual panel, work 3 rows of garter stitch before you get started. So I'm going to get started with row 1, which is after the 3 setup rows. And I got a wild tail here. Hold on, let me see if pulling it through. There we go. Okay. Sorry, my tail was poking out a little bit and trying to stick up on me. So I have my 16 stitches, just double checking. And I'm going to get started with row 1. No real demanding stitches in this pattern, thankfully. So knit 1, purl 4, and this is where the repeat begins. Knit 1, purl 4, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over. So, whoops, so I'm going to yarn over. It's weird going from a purl to a knit. You just have to go like that, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, but then we're coming back to purls, so we have to bring it all the way around. Purl 4. And for our final stitch, that ends our repeat. For our final stitch, we're going to knit 1. Okay, we've worked our first row. Nothing special. If you're planning on using stitch markers, you should probably go ahead and place them. As you noticed, we had some yarn overs that we didn't compensate for. And so that's going to increase our stitches. If you're working the panel, I think you're up to 78 because that was 2 increases per repeat. So we're up to 18 here on the swatch. Because it does increase, just keep in mind you can't really use it for stitch count, but you can use it to mark the repeat places, just because the stitch count's going to change from row to row. For row 2, we start with a knit 5. Yarn over, which as you can see is right where our other yarn over was. We're going to yarn over and then we're going to purl 3. So we're purling, this is creating that blossom. We're purling the yarn over, we're purling the middle stitch, and we're purling this yarn over too. And then we're going to yarn over again and knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, purl 1, and then knit 4 and end with a knit 1. Okay, so we've established a couple little purls right here that on this side kind of pop up as knits. That's the stem. So it's a stem that follows up to the blossom and then keeps going to the next blossom. And then where these yarn overs are, that's how we're creating our actual blossoms. The yarn overs, they increase, but they also create like a pop. So you can see some of them, but it's hard to tell that this is actually made from all yarn overs unless you're looking closely because of the way that it is raised. So I know that you can see them kind of on the top end, but you can't see them all the way around. It's kind of a fun feature of the stitch. Okay, so now we're on row 3. Start with a knit 1 and a purl 4. And another knit 1 and purl 4. And it's kind of easy to tell where you're going to be going because we've led the same way for this the whole time. And now we've come to where our yarn overs are. And so what we're going to do for those is we're going to yarn over, knit 5. So again, we're knitting the yarn over from the previous row and all the stitches in the middle. And the other yarn over from the previous row. And then we'll yarn over again to create that blossom. Okay. And then we're going to purl 4. And end with a knit 1. Okay. And after finishing row 3, you can start to see some shape. And this actually is the right side of the pattern. The blossoms are worked on a background of reverse stockinette. So as you're working, I had the tendency to see it as the right side or the wrong side, because when I think of the right side of knitting, this is what I think of, right? Because we're usually working stockinette, but this is actually the right side. And once you get a blossom on there, it'll really, be clear to you what the front and the back are. But just keep that in mind if you put it down. You are working on a background of reverse stockinette. So this is row 4. We're going to start with a knit 5. Going to yarn over, purl 7, and again that's our blossom. So we've purled the yarn over, the stitches in the middle and the yarn over. We yarn over again, knit 4. purl our stem, which is a 1, and then knit to the end. If you are working the panel right now, you're going to have over 100 stitches already because of so many repeats. And let's see, how many do we have? 5, 10, 15. We have 24 just on the swatch when we started with 16. So it's quite a big increase. That is, I know you guys can hear my cable like scratching around as I knit. Excuse me. That's the reason that I recommend that you use circular needles, is because if you're using straight needles, you might really be jamming on the stitches to make it work at this point in time. Okay, let's take a look at row 5. It's a lot of the same. This is our last increase row before we actually start decreasing. So increase to build the bottom of the blossom and decrease to build the top. So we're going to start with a knit 1, purl 4. Again, sorry for the noise coming from my needles. Oops. Another knit 1 and purl 4. And you probably have figured out what to do here. We're going to yarn over, and then we're going to knit all these the yarn over and all these stitches in the center. So, you know, I know from the pattern that I need to knit 9, but I don't have to count 9, because what I can do is just keep going until I hit the final yarn over, and I know that I'm done knitting 9. Yarn over and purl 4, and end with that final knit 1. So with row 5 done, getting ready to start row 6, we've increased all the way. And now we're going to start decreasing. So you should have 126 stitches if you're working the actual panel right now. And now we're going to decrease some of them. So take a deep breath. All right. Knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's where we start our decreases. Okay, so we're going to purl 2 together for the first one, and then we're going to purl 7, then we're going to do everybody's favorite stitch from last week, which was the purl 2 together through the back loop. So through the back loop here, like this, purl 2 together. Okay, and this gives you a really good idea of how the slants look when you purl 2 together and purl 2 together through the back loop, so you understand what it'll be doing on the front side. Knit 4, whoops, did I, did I not purl my 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, I did. Okay, sorry, I just miscounted my knits, the 4 knits, the simple part of the project. Goodness. Okay, purl 1, knit 4, and then the final stitch is also a knit 1, so we'll knit that too. Okay, so we've got our blossom. Let's look. This is the right side. We've got our blossom. The stem of the next blossom is really popping, but this blossom hasn't popped yet, and that's okay. It won't until we get some more fabric on there. So no need to worry about that. We'll just move on to the next row. Row 7. Knit 1, purl 4, And we're actually going to do all those stitches again. Knit 1, purl 4. Okay, and these are decrease rows, but we're on this side, so we're actually going to, for our decreases, be doing a slip, knit, and pass the slip stitch over. Then we're going to knit 5, which is the center of our blossom, knit 2 together, which is the decrease on the other side of the blossom, and then purl 4. For the final stitch, we'll knit 1, and that's what we'll have after row 7. Still not seeing a pop, but it's coming. Okay. For row 8, we'll start with a knit 5. And then we immediately start decreasing. So we'll go straight into our purl 2 together, purl 3, purl 2 together through the back loops, always an awkward stitch, knit 4, purl 1, knit 4. And the final stitch is also a knit stitch. And again, this is the wrong side. If we turn it over to the right side, and let's slide it off the needles just so you get a sense of what it's starting to look like. We are starting to see a little bit of that blossom pop out. Let's go to row 9. And we're cutting down our stitches hugely now. You should, after this row, we'll have 78, and then after the next row, we'll be back down to 66 if you're working the panel. So for row 9, we're going to knit 1, purl 4, and we're going to do these two, the knit 1, the purl 4 twice, just like we've been doing. So another knit 1. I'm trying, guys. It just keeps slipping. And this is the boring part, right? Just let me get through the knit 1, purl 4 to show them the good stuff. Okay. So I've knit 1, purl 4, knit 1, purl 4, slip 1, knit 1, pass that slip stitch over, and then we're going to knit 1 and knit 2 together. And that's our blossom. It does not look like much, but trust me, once you get a whole panel of them going, it is quite lovely. Okay. So we're going to purl 4 and then knit 1 at the end. Look at that. You can really start to see the shape. For row 10, we're going to start with a knit 5. We're going to purl 3 together. This is the top of our blossom. So we'll purl 3 together. Put through all 3 and purl it. And then we're going to knit 4, purl 1, and then we'll go ahead and knit to the end. And once we've finished 10 rows, we've already got our first round of blossoms. So these blossoms, they're done. What you see here is the stem or vine, I think of it as a stem, that goes to the next blossom. And this will have stem above it. So we're really just creating the inverse of this with the next 10 rows. That's why we're able to cut off the last repeat right here and have it still look lovely. Okay, so our next 10 rows are going to create the offset blossoms. Let's go ahead and try those. And they, spoiler alert, are going to be remarkably similar to the rows we just did, right? Because we're really just doing the first half second and the second half first. So for row 11, we're going to start with a knit 1, purl 4, okay, I thought I split that. And then we're going to create this is where we're starting to create our blossom, and you know that it's going to happen here because we already have a stem to work on. So it's a lot easier once you get to the second and third and however many other blossoms, because you know exactly where things are going to go. So we've purled our 4, we're going to yarn over, knit 1, and yarn over. And so we've established the bottom of our blossom with that. And then we're going to purl 4, knit 1, that's our stem, purl 4. And we'll finish with a knit 1. And you can really see this blossom taking shape. It looks right now like the purl 3 together is actually pulling really hard, but once you have a panel all the way done and you've blocked it a little bit and it's relaxed, excuse me, what you'll find is that it doesn't look as drastic as all that. It actually looks really lovely and round, and you probably wouldn't have noticed. Okay, on to row 12. We're going to start with a knit 5, purl 1, which is our stem, knit 4, we're here at our yarn over, so we know it's time to yarn over, purl 3, yarn over, knit 4, and our final stitch, of course, is a knit 1. So really back here, this is starting to disappear because it's just like if you were doing like a knit 1, knit 4, purl 1, knit 4, rib. It's actually starting to close up, and it's really popping on that other side. For row 13, we're going to start with a knit 1, purl 4. Oops. And then we're going to do a yarn over, knit 5. So 1, 2, 3. And since we're knitting 5 and we are working on the blossom, we know that that middle stitch should be lined up. That's one way that you can check where you are. Yarn over, purl 4. Knit 1 for our stem, purl 4, and knit 1. And if you are especially knitting the panel, you'll see we're increasing a lot of stitches now. For row 14, start with a knit 5, purl 1 for your stem, knit 4, okay, and then we're back at our blossom right here. So we're going to yarn over, purl 7, and yarn overs, they're so odd going from knit to purl and purl to knit. You just have to roll with it. I know this is my last one. And then I'm going to yarn over again and knit 4. And my final stitch will also be knit. So once the work gets to here, you can really see what you're working with, right? So sorry for the jiggle. So the wrong side's really taken shape, and we're starting to see kind of holes and what created that. It looks like a honeycomb to me, a honeycomb knitting pattern. We're starting to really see what created that. Sorry for the noise. And then on our right side, you can see the blossoms really taking shape. And there you go. Almost looks like a balloon too. But of course, for the purposes of this, we're gonna keep it a blossom because we're going with a very nature-based theme. Okay, so here we are, row 15. Gonna start with a knit 1. Purl 4. Yarn over and knit 9. And then yarn over one more time. Purl 4. I can look down the line and see what we need to do, right? Knit 1. And then I see we have a purl 4, knit 1 after that. Okay, so that's us about, so yeah, exactly 75% of the way through, 3/4 of the way through the swatch. Okay. Row 16, look at that. Really looks like something. We're gonna start with a knit 5. And on this side where there's no blossom, we're really just doing each stitch as it presents, right? So we'll knit the knits, we'll purl the purls, and when we get to the blossom, we'll figure out what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, and so we've knit 5, purled 1, knit 4, and we're going to purl 2 together because now we're on our decrease rows. Purl 2 together, purl 7, and then purl 2 together through that back loop. Just do that one nice and slow, and then knit to the end. Well, we'll knit 4, and then we have a final stitch, which is a knit 1. So if you're working the swatch, you knit to the end. Okay, that's after 16. Row 17, little bit more of the same. Start with a knit 1, purl 4. All right, slip 1, knit 1, pass our slip stitch over, knit across. So there's 5 knit stitches here. And then we're going to knit 2 together. purl 4, knit 1, purl 4, and the final stitch is also a knit 1. Okay. Row 18. Gonna start with a knit 5. Getting really close to the end here. And of course we're gonna purl this stitch, so purl 1. And then we're gonna knit 4. Purl 2 together. Purl 3. And then we're gonna purl 2 together through the back loop. Did I miss one? Knit 4, purl 1, knit 4, purl 2 together, purl 3, and then purl 2 together through the back loop. Oh, no, I'm good. Sorry. Sorry for the alarm. Hold on. There we go. All right, purl 2 together through the back loop. Goodness. Then I'm gonna knit 4. I got a little too overly confident and, was just kind of rolling, and then I thought, oh, did I make a mistake? And then end with a knit 1. But I did not. I was doing what I was supposed to do. So here you go. And last 2. So for row 19, we are starting to get a little bit of curl on the sides, even though we are, using a knit stitch for everything. The garter stitch rows at the bottom and the top will help with the curl there, though. So if you're working the panel, I mean. Knit 1, purl 4, we're gonna do slip 1, knit 1, and then pass the slip stitch over. We're going to knit 1, knit 2 together, purl 4, knit 1, and then again purl 4. This finishes our repeat, and so we will knit 1. It's the final row. All right, start with a knit 5. Purl 1. Knit 4 again. And here we go. This is where we're going to get to it. Purl 3 together. And then we'll knit to the end. So what we're doing is actually knitting 4, and then it's our last repeat because we're only doing 1, so we're knitting 1. All right, so you can see it's already taking on that that honeycomb shape, right? On the back side, on the wrong side. And if we flip it, we have our little blossoms. Okay, so if you are working the panel, you're going to work these 20 rows that we've just done 4 times, and that'll bring you to 80. And then you're going to, sorry, I just smacked the camera. And then you're going to work rows 1 to 10 again. So that'll bring you to 90 of the pattern, and then you did the 3 garter stitch in the beginning. So you're going to work 4 of garter stitch at the end. So 3 rows of garter stitch, Repeat these 20 rows 4 times, then work row 1 to 10 once more, and then work 4 rows of garter stitch. And then you'll bind off all your stitches and you'll be done. If you are working this, just the swatch, you're done now, and you can go ahead and bind off if you're saving them for some reason, or you can just go ahead and frog it and get ready. So the written pattern is of course in links below, and that is it for this stitch. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can give me a thumbs up, or you can subscribe so you can see week 6 when it comes out. See you next week. Bye.